Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. My name's Will, you're watching Ball Python Breeder UK. In today's video we're going to talk about baby ball python care and how it doesn't really differ from adults that much, but there's these kind of small details we need to pay attention to and things we need to think about basically. So a big part of the video is going to focus on enclosure and setups, how I set my babies up and I don't know, how I get them growing and get them moving to a larger body weight and larger kind of, well, better kind of confidence in their feeding before they leave here. So bear in mind that I do things on a small scale, no pun intended. I only do sort of 1 to 4 clutches maximum in a year, and this allows me to do things a certain way. If you're a big breeder, you might have other techniques which would probably be interesting to me to hear about as well. But we're going to cover the basics too, so we're going to look at temperature, humidity, handling, food, hygiene as well. As I mentioned, we're going to pay particular attention to setups because that really, again, I'm trying not to do puns, but I keep doing it. A good setup really sets you up for success. Oh no, that sounds terrible. But again, on food as well, we're going to take a kind of discuss a little bit food size as well. So you're probably wondering how I actually think that caring for baby ball pythons differs from adults. And really, I mean, overall, it doesn't differ that much. But the thing we kind of need to remember with ball pythons is that they are, you know, they're small pythons, but they are pythons. They are in the Pythonidae, which is a family of typically giant, very large-bodied snakes, and, you know, some of the largest snakes in the world. They've evolved to fit a niche which kind of suits a smaller body size, a smaller overall length. As pythons go, they're quite small, but for their size, you know, up to anywhere from sort of 3 to 5 foot long, which is quite common, they are quite stocky. And what you find with the babies is that they've still got this kind of giant snake growth rate, and because they're growing so much in build, because they're so corpulent, they're so heavy-bodied, they're kind of growing exponentially. So they're growing, even though they don't get to be big snakes, they're growing very, 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 very fast. They're putting on weight very, very, very fast. And this means that all of their biological processes involving their metabolism, shedding, the development of disease, fighting disease, anything their body is doing is influenced by this rapid growth rate in their first, well, year to 18 months of age. So this is why we need to pay close attention to stuff and think about things a little bit differently. So the first thing I'm going to cover is temperature. Obviously, like any ball pythons, for some reason I always say keep your temperatures to like 90 to 91 Fahrenheit in the warm end, but really anywhere from 88 to 91 is fine. And I use the same temperatures for babies. So, you know, so far so good. Use a digital thermometer probe, use an appropriate heating source for your setup with an appropriate thermostat, and double check your temperatures with an infrared thermometer gun. So obviously, like I say, it just sounds like the same as for adults. The thing is though, because they're growing so fast, but also because they have a small body size, they interact with temperature, or temperature interacts with them in a slightly different way than it does adults. So their core body temperature, if temperatures are wrong, it's going to change faster than an adult's. Much, much faster. You know, a lot of people say, so respiratory infections, for example, in adults can take up to a month to develop. I'm not saying this based on fact, I'm just saying what people say to me. And they say that, you know, you can spot a respiratory infection and treat it quite early on with an adult, and a lot of people have said to me that they've done that. But with babies, with ones this size, I know for a fact that respiratory infections from cold snaps or, you know, incorrect temperatures can happen a lot more quickly. And I know this from a really unpleasant experience that happened to me, which was where someone who is now out of big business for, you know, good reasons, sent me a snake this size with a courier, which was supposed to be thermostat controlled because we have thermostat controlled vans for couriers in the UK here. And when the snake got to me, it was frozen. I'd seen videos, photos of it feeding and everything else the day before. Not feeding the day before, but photos of it being handling and previous feeding video. And I knew this snake was, I had enough evidence to believe that this snake was healthy. When it got to me, it was freezing cold. Day after it got to me, it had a shocking, rasping, rattling, laboured, breathing respiratory infection starting up. I got it to the vets. The vet said I'm going to treat it and do my best. 2 days later, it was dead. And that was because it got too cold for one night. And you know what? You might be able to reverse that in an adult, but with babies, I'm not sure even, there was any way to reverse that RI that had come on so incredibly quickly. And that just goes to show how fast the body temperature can change and how fast that change can really affect the core temperature of a snake and just completely throw its immune system off. So, with baby snakes, I don't know what I can say about this really other than, you all want to get your temperatures correct. We all do all the time. But with baby snakes, I would say monitor the setup and kind of aim for even more stability in your temperatures than you would for adults, bearing in mind that, not so long ago they were in an incubator in an egg. Now they're out in the fresh air, or not so fresh air. So yeah, do keep a very close eye on your temperatures. That's all I can say about that. Next, when it comes to humidity, we've got a similar kind of deal. When we think about humidity for the babies, I do keep it a bit higher than the adults. I like it to be about 70-75%. With damp paper towels or cocoa chips, you can do this quite effectively. These guys I've moved on to newspaper now because they're a bit bigger, but you'll see that in the setup in a bit. But the main thing with humidity is very dry humidity or very high humidity can kind of accelerate disease or make them more susceptible to it, obviously. But also the shedding process in babies goes so much faster, way faster. With the adults, with the older adults especially, you'll see the eyes in blue and you'll think, oh, okay, I've got a few days before this guy sheds. With the babies, it's not like that. It's like you look one day and they're just turning blue. You look again the next day and they're shedding. And if you haven't just kept such a really close eye on your humidity the whole time, it's just ridiculously easy to get into trouble with babies shedding. Fortunately, I'm living somewhere which is just ridiculously humid now. Fortunately, not so fortunate for me because I'm getting mold in the house and stuff like that. But I don't have shedding problems. But if you are somewhere where, we'll talk about it more when we look at the setup, but if you're somewhere where you're using a lot of central heating, or you're somewhere dry like the desert, like out west in the US, keep really close eye on your humidity for your babies. Because, the last thing you want is a bad shed, especially if it drags on and it's hard to get it off and it's just more stress for the animal. So it's another thing that just moves way faster with babies. So now we've had a quick look at those two topics, let's head over and have a look at one of my setups. It's just a quick homemade rack I've made for growing on my babies, and then we'll come back and finish off. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at how I house my babies. This is all homemade, but this is the way that works for me, and that I get really hungry babies that eat well and end up kind of, bigger than you'd expect by the time they leave here at, usually 3 or 4 months of age. So first off, when they hatch, I put them straight into, some people put them all in one tub, sometimes I put them all in one tub together for a week in nice damp paper towels. But once they've had their first shed, I put them into these tubs. This is a 3-litre Braplast tub. I don't know if you get those in the States, but they're pretty common, pretty standard to use in the hobby here. All I do is I put them in with a simple tiny hide. I think that's maybe 3 or 4 pounds, maybe $5-6. A little tea light for a water dish, paper towel roll or toilet paper roll if I've got one around, and for substrate I put paper towels. The paper towels stay damp, they're really easy to change, they're quick, they're hygienic, and in this really small environment I can keep the babies under very constant humidity and temperature. They feel very safe and they eat well. Well, they start to eat well. So out of 20 hatchlings, I might have 2, 3 that are assist feeders, and for me, I think that's not bad. After that, when they start to get some size to them, they're eating well. I sort of get them onto chubs, and then I move them into a larger enclosure, which is a 33-litre tub. I've no idea what that is in gallons or quarts because I can't remember. And at this size I put a divider in, a 3-lane divider. I've got 3 babies in here, and at this age I add enrichment for them. Now the enrichment is extremely easy. There's not much of an excuse to not give them enrichment. I know it's a big argument in the hobby. Some people say they need no enrichment. Some people say they need lots of enrichment. All I do is I just play it safe and I just put some cheap stuff in there. So I've got paper towel rolls. This guy loves, whoop, thought he was going to get me again. He usually does. This guy loves this paper towel roll. And I think these were actually from some kind of dessert. Can't remember. Anyway, so this is all cheap stuff, right? You've got paper towel rolls, glass dishes for water bowls from a dessert, and then the plastic plants are cheap too. All I've done is I've cut pieces of like the Komodo plastic plants or the Exoterra plastic plants, and I've attached them to aquarium suction cups, which I'll put a link to those in the description. And these are the ones that comes with zip ties. So you literally just put the zip tie through, put a plant onto the zip tie it hard, and you attach it to the sides with suckers. He's watching, he's ready to come out for round 2. He's probably hungry. I did feed him 2 days ago, but still. Anyway, you get the plants on like that. It gives them extra cover. And in addition to their hiding area in the back, they've then got plants to climb. They've got something to explore. I mean, you've got to throw these away regularly because they pee on them, obviously. But they've got things to do, and often in the morning you find that they've climbed through the plants, they've pulled the suckers off. They haven't hurt themselves, but it's given them something to explore and something to do. And this is how I find that I get their, I don't know how to say it, I get their growth, their size, their temperament to match their enclosure size. And then in a month or so maybe, when they get a bit bigger, I'm going to remove the divider down the middle, and then I'll have 2 in it. And then when those get bigger, I'll move them up to 1 per one of these tubs. And then after that, they go to a V70 size tub. And if they get too big for that, they'll go into a big tub setup. Because here in the UK, you can get absolutely massive tubs if you need them. You can get 150 litre tubs, which kind of, because they're so cheap and you can modify them any way you like, it kind of blows the whole expensive vivarium argument out of the water. So there's a couple of other things I want to say before we move on. First of all, I need to cover the topic of substrate really quickly, because I'm using unprinted newspaper in here, and that works great for me because I live in England and I also live by a river. You really can't get more humid than that. I mean, the humidity in my house is always good. So just, low humidity isn't really an issue for me. If you live somewhere drier, or I don't know, if you're perhaps going to use central heating a lot during the winter, and you're going to, then you will have probably struggle to maintain humidity with unprinted newspaper. The main reason I use it is because of the hygiene factor, and I can change it every week. But you could use something like cocoa chips, for example, or even cypress mulch, and you could maintain higher humidity, especially if you live somewhere dry, like I said. And you could spot clean it and you could make it last longer. So that would be a better option for you. So make sure you do adapt this to where you live. Also, a couple other things I wanted to mention. First up, as I mentioned in the temperature area, I don't know if you can see it, I do use digital thermometers on these, but just like adult snakes, I still go around and check the temperatures with a temperature gun. So it really is kind of just like adult snakes, but I miniaturize everything and then I scale it up gradually. And the thing I wanted to say about that really is about this technique is that a lot of breeders do it, everyone knows about it, they've been doing it for years. But what we're seeing now is this idea that's being brought forward that ball pythons can't adapt to a vivarium or a larger enclosure after living in a tub. And there's all kinds of, shall I say, unusual science going into this that I've seen people talking about. There's a lot of people convinced that if you have your babies in a rack like this for the first 3 to 6 months of their lives, their brains will be atrophied and they won't be able to adjust to a vivarium. And speaking as a biologist who's worked in biology and actually content creation, funnily enough, for going on 20 years now, alongside data, which is kind of the role I'm in now, I've got to say that is mostly pseudoscience. It doesn't add up. So a biologist who doesn't have a vested interest, who doesn't have a strong personal bias, if they see a snake starting off in a smaller enclosure, that goes into a larger one and has trouble feeding or feels anxious or hides a lot, not that happens all the time with ball pythons, but it happens often, that biologist would simply say that's a neophobic animal. Now, neophobic versus neophilic is an extremely important concept in biology, and it is especially relevant for reptiles, many of which hide a lot, hence you don't find them out in the open in the wild all the time. Even though there's hundreds of thousands of them, you don't see them laying around everywhere. So neophobic means afraid of the unknown, or as most of us would just say, shy or anxious. Neophilic means going towards the unknown and being braver and more curious. And we see this on a scale with ball pythons. Some of them are curious, some of them will explore. There's baby ball pythons you can put straight into a 4-foot long vivarium, at this size, and they do absolutely fine. There is no issue so long as they have hides. Others will spend most of the time hiding, but they'll still eat. And a large proportion, yet others, will become shy and they will eat less or not at all if they're put straight into a larger environment. The concept that their brains can't adapt to a larger environment after being in a smaller one goes completely against the biology of reptiles, birds, any other animals with strong sort of instincts. So for example, if that were true, they also wouldn't know how to breed when the time came. Birds wouldn't know how to migrate when the time comes because they haven't seen it and learned it before. So you can't say because they haven't climbed before they don't know how to and stuff like that. When you get down to the biology of it and the basic science and the logic, it just doesn't add up. So with ball pythons, a species that are often but not always highly neophobic, your solution as a keeper to keep them feeding and get them doing well is to simply upgrade the size. Go from a 3 litre to a divided or a 10 litre or 20 litre or whatever, and then move it up and up and up. This baby that starts in a 3 litre tub could eventually be in a 150 litre tub or a 4, 5, 6 foot vivarium and do absolutely fine, have no fasting or almost no fasting, and to eat and do well the whole time. There is no need for a debate between tubs versus rack, big enclosure versus small closure. It's simply a case of knowing the animals, knowing about their tendencies towards neophobia and adapting their enclosure. You get them rolling, you get their weight gaining, their appetite gaining, and their confidence growing as they grow, and you upgrade. And there's no other secret to it. Unless, of course, you really want to sell big enclosures or you really want to harm the hobby. In that case, then you would make some nice, more or less scientific studies to support the idea that keeping them in racks harms them forever. So that's what I've got to say on the subject. I know it will upset people, but even if you completely disagree with me, still take away the concept that it's better to start off babies, if you breed them yourself in particular, in smaller enclosures than enlarge them. Anyway, let's go back and finish the rest of the video. So now we've had a look at that, which I hope was interesting. I wanted to discuss hygiene quickly. Hygiene I keep to a very high standard with babies because, again, everything goes faster, disease comes more quickly. And really, a lot of the time, a lot of people, not just myself, do keep the babies on substrate, which is very easy to change, like paper towels for at least the first few months. But even in cocoa chips, you can spot clean it regularly and change it regularly. Personally, I prefer to use a paper towel so that I can change the substrate every week, disinfect it with diluted F10, which is veterinary disinfectant. I'm sure you can get something similar in the US. And just, again, maintain more of a constant focus on hygiene every week. Whereas adults, I guess, especially if you spot clean, you can wait weeks between cleaning out adults. Babies, of course I'm talking if you got like substrate like cocoa chips. With babies, I like to clean them all out every week. And I like to keep a close eye on that hygiene because I know their little bodies have less of an immune system because their immune system's almost built on proportionate to their total energy stores and the temperature that they can maintain themselves at. So it's more sensitive in snakes this size. So that is another key point to keep an eye on. Basically, I'm just telling you to hover over your baby ball pythons all the time. And I guess that's kind of what most of us do in the first few weeks anyway, but just making sure that all these things are really nicely under wraps so that you never have a sick baby, you never have a baby with stuck shed, you never have a baby that, you know, starts out well and then goes off food and gives you trouble. So after hygiene, we come to handling, and this is, you know, obviously they're not hard to tame. They're, if anything, these are being extremely well behaved, and obviously, if I'm honest, I have bribed them. I fed them a couple of days ago, so they got full bellies. But basically, if you get enough hatchlings, they're very easy to handle. If they get aggressive or defensive, as I should say, because they're not really aggressive, they just get scared. All I do is I tap them on the head very, very gently with a paper towel roll, and they go into full retreat, and then you can just pick them up. Do that a few times, and they learn that you're no harm, and just handle them gently like this, and they just really do become very gentle very quickly. But in the first month or so, some of them are snappy, and you will get bitten. Generally, it's a little tap, and honestly, it's if you are nervous about it, you haven't been bitten before, you'll probably just laugh at how puny it is. So really, handling is quite easy. It's just a question of letting them explore with you, like I'm doing. Handling them maybe every week when they're small, maybe a couple of times a week. Not so much that you can stress them out, but enough so that they get used to it. After a while, they just switch off. They just realise you're not a threat, and if anything, they're just wondering where the next meal is. Which brings us nicely to food. So, the main mistake I see people making with baby ball pythons, trying to grow them on to breed, and even with baby ball pythons that they've bought from someone, is giving them prey that is too small. And this is such a common problem, and I think part of the problem is that we get all these guides online that tell us make sure your snake doesn't get obese, make sure you only give the adults prey item that's 5-10% of their body weight, and just all this stuff that is quite difficult to apply to a living animal, because living animals go through all these stages of growth, of reproduction, of all these different things, so it's very hard to fit feeding into a chart, as it were. It doesn't always work. I've tried to do it, but it doesn't really work. It's a bit complicated. But basically, when they are young, when they're under 6 months of age, or even under a year's age really, but especially when they're very small, you want to give them a large prey item in kind of proportion to their body size. I start mine off on rat pups or hopper mice, and then move them on to rat chubs as quickly as I can. Some of them are more stubborn, they take mice for a while. Every once in a while I have them start on small African soft-furred rats. But basically these guys are all about 180 to 200 grams in body weight. I'm feeding them small weaners that are around 40 grams. So what's that? Somewhere between 20 to 25% of their total body weight. And that is the size of meal they need to grow consistently at this size, because like I said, they are in a giant snake family. Even if they aren't giants themselves, they still have that rapid growth rate, and they are growing in width as well as length. It's not like growing a garter snake or a corn snake. This is growing a python. Even if it's not one of the big pythons, it's still a python. So do keep that in mind. Offer them large prey items in proportion to their size, and then as they grow into adults, it's as they grow in age that you reduce the proportion of the prey item in the size of the prey item, in proportion to the size of the snake. So that is something to think about, because again, like I say, rapid growth, rapid metabolism, and feeding real babies doesn't really fit too well with charts all the time. But if you do that, if you get them feeding well, you can look at these, they're healthy, they're active, they are very alert. And when I send these off to people, the response I always get is, that baby's bigger than I was expected, it's doing extremely well, and they usually almost always feed when someone else gets them. So that's pretty simple tip. Again, I'm not giving you anything groundbreaking or new, I'm just letting you know kind of the things that help me get really chunky, robust, healthy babies quite quickly. This one's looking at the ceiling for some reason, I'm not quite sure why. This is the most shy one, this bongo in the middle. That's a super pastel spot nose bongo, I think, 100% Heifer clown. But yeah, that's a shy one, so she's not going to try and escape too much. Anyway, I hope this has been a useful video for you. and giving you some kind of tips and some things to look out for with your babies. They are getting restless now, so I'm going to have to wrap it up. But as always, please do comment and tell me your tips. Tell me what you do differently to me. I'd really like to hear from other people. And as always, these are on Morph Market too. If any of you are in the, I guess in the UK or Europe and you want to buy one, just let me know and say you watched the video and I'll give you, 30% off or something. Anyway, please come back, like and subscribe, and come back for next week for the next video. Thank you.